today we see a lot of distrust to the mainstream media by the public, and really it's something we have experienced here in Ukraine, but we really see the very similar patterns in the UK during Brexit. As now we also see in the UK, like especially when like the mainstream media are considered to support anti-Brexit campaign. Would you share this thing that that the generally there is a lot of public which that there is this kind of crisis?
So the paradox of Brexit was the whole anti-establishment narrative, which included against establishment media, was done by parts of the establishment. So all the major newspapers were for Brexit. Daily Telegraph, The Sun, the Daily Mail. So the biggest broadsheet, the biggest middlebrow newspaper, and the biggest tabloid. If anything, it was a victory for very, very classical, communication, propaganda, whatever you want to call it. The BBC is considered to have not done its job very well because it didn't interrogate, some of the falsehoods from both sides, but it's considered more from Brexit side. So a little bit like the situation with when Russian media plants a false narrative, BBC gave equal weight to two sides. So let's say, an economic expert, so most economic experts were for Remain. Maybe one was for Brexit, but they had to be given equal time. So there was that, but actually, Brexit ran a very innovative campaign in some ways. But no, there's a little bit of a trick. If anything, it was a very establishment kind of it's the media, it's the newspapers what won it. It was a really big victory for classical newspapers.
Why do you think we have here this, normality of the false narrative which is presented by the establishment? Because what we thought that the top-level politician wouldn't lie that bluntly, especially about the figures, statistic, and that's something which we also see in the Trump's campaign, in the Donald Trump campaign in the US, and also a lot of experts who just say something which is factually not right, but fact-checking doesn't help. So,
very good fact-checking organization looked at the facts for Brexit. Sure, there were some big lies, like the idea, a very big campaign slogan was that we send 350 million to the EU, which is incorrect. But actually the fact-checkers found that most of the time, both sides were using facts. They were just taking the facts that they needed. So there's lots of reasons why we've gone from sort of information to data. Yeah? Before we had authorities. There was the Office for National Statistics, and you could reference that. Now there are so many different think tanks, so many points of authority, you just pick the one that matters the most. There's so much data out there that you just pick the data that you need, and you put it into the emotional narrative that you need. Also, the amount of information out there means that you can't have a core narrative anymore, and again, people then pick the narrative that they need. Social media strengthened this. Google strengthens this. So when you Google something, you're not Googling, you're not researching. Google gives you the answers based on your previous searches. So you end up sort of essentially confirming your biases over and over and over. So the very nature of information today, and the fact there's so much of it, and the way that we search for it, drives people into what some people call echo chambers. It's pointless trying to break through an echo chamber directly with facts, because the whole point is people are already, they only hear what they want to hear. So this is one of the paradoxes of the information revolution. We thought that it would mean more information, better research, more access to facts, better democracy. Actually, it's causing this chaos where people just choose the facts that suit them.
We also mentioned, at least from here, then in case of Brexit, or even especially in the case of the elections in the US, you see the papers very openly taking the positions, and even the which was not so open, at the same, I'm speaking not about the, usually like the Telegraph or the Sun would take, but now you would even have the New York Times, would be very harsh on Donald Trump, or really would last like, he's dangerous, the things like that, which you would never hear previously about the other presidential candidate. So, and a lot of journalists would also refer that it's a civilizational choice. It's not just exactly the issue of the political parties and the chase. Do you think that this is also the part of this information revolution?
Certainly. Look, last time we had an information revolution was the 1930s, probably. 1950s with TV, 1930s with radio, yeah? And who does it empower first? You know, totalitarian regimes. How many books are there about Hitler? How uninteresting he was as a human being, but an incredible orator. And without the radio, that couldn't have been, there would have been no Hitler. So information technologies tend to not only empower Hromadske and activists who fight against authoritarian regimes, they tend to empower demagogues and manipulators. And it takes a while for society to build up its defenses. So last time we had to go through a world war and the Nuremberg trials. Hopefully we won't have to do that again.
You currently here in Kiev, and you know, for some time probably Ukraine and Russia had been like a bit of a playground for some of the new information technologies in politics. So what is for you the interesting thing to see in these countries? Not already after the the start of the Russian-Ukrainian war, but at this stage.
Well, I've always said
that
we
see something what the world would be interested, what could be copy-pasted and used by some other people or outside of this region. Because sometimes we are picking up from somebody, sometimes we could be on the forefront.
Are you fishing for compliments? Is this what you're
No,
doing?
no,
You're saying,
no,
moments go,
no, maybe
you, Natalia.
No, maybe we are in a place where we shouldn't be, maybe it's...
Okay,
I'm speaking about Ukraine, of course.
Yeah. Well, look, it's fascinating. I'm not saying this is good or bad, but it's fascinating and terrifying watching what some people here refer to as, what is it, the Facebookocracy. So this, it was meant to be like a good thing that ministers would start communicating with people via social media. I think here you've just taken it to another level. I mean, the way social media is used by various ministers and stuff is very, very interesting. I'm not quite sure what it will lead to, but you're definitely way ahead of the curve here.
And what about at which, when we started to talk about Russia, there was this whole discussion about the ways the trolls and all the other things had been used by the regimes. Do you see how it's also working outside of Russia and as well? What beside this Facebookocracy is something to watch out here? We have more researchers coming to ask us what's happening, especially during the time of the conflict. So maybe what would be for the interest of the researchers on the...
I think, look, I can't remember, this was actually around Brexit, this research, and don't quote me on the figures, but something like 60% of the internet is now automated. These are bots, planted stories, retweeted, shared. I think we have to start to understand how much of these narratives online are actually being engineered. And once we understand that, and there are data tools which can help us do that, maybe we can start, deconstructing this world. Because at the moment it just sort of generates these narratives, and it's very hard to tell to what extent they're real and have real impact. The most disturbing thing happening globally, and I know you have this here as well, is the use of online harassment. We see it in Latin America a lot, in Mexico, and I know we see it here as well. So journalists, activists being attacked by we don't know who, because you can never source anything, but basically being threatened and psychologically broken.
We can discuss to bring these realities, the online reality and offline reality together, because sometimes it's really hard to understand, is it really the public opinion? Are there really people supporting this campaign, this candidate, this idea?
I don't know, better... I think we're only at the start of sort of researching how data works. What I don't feel comfortable with is that you know, a lot of the data from algorithms is not public. So the technology companies have it and the advertising companies have it and rich political parties can have it. So it's way beyond just social media. It's like, what are people looking at in Google? You know, with fashion, you know, you can usually tell if pink is going to be a big hit this season if people have been looking up pink on Google, yeah? You can just see trends developing. So the most important thing at the moment is for us, normal people, activists, journalists, to have tools with which to, you know, understand the data. Because at the moment it's this closed world that has it, and that's very, very unhealthy. I mean, there's a lot more on the internet we can find out outside of like what's trending on Twitter, which is a bit of an obvious one.